So
Yeah, I think it's easy to be neurotic with like dumbbells and barbell movements that you know what you're supposed to use on. So, and maybe we'll just use like a lateral raise as an example. I mean, at points in my life, I've been able to do 35, 40 pound lateral raises with decent form. I don't know if it's like perfect form, like there might have been like a little body English in there. And
right.
so then when I incorporate a dumbbell lateral raise now, and I have this new kind of focus on movement quality, et cetera, 35 or 40 pounds is way too heavy.
I think a lot of us have a lot of emotional attachment to these more traditional exercises. And I think there's definitely something to be said for the idea that even if, like, let's say there was an exercise which was not that difficult to do, I don't know, it required just some, I don't know, cable or maybe a machine, and that would replace one exercise like the squat or an overhead press or something that is like done with barbells. It's very difficult, being done traditionally. Like even if the machine variant or whatever was more effective, I think a lot of us would just have a hard time, like, I guess, accepting that, especially if the movement looks a bit like funny, or the type of movement that these like functional trainer, like, I don't know, like these Bosu Ball type people do in the gym. So I think a lot of it has to do with just that. But I don't know, like, what do you guys have that kind of attachment to certain lifts in the gym?
I mean, I definitely have the attachment in terms of strength, like of an exercise like this. I was the whole thing with like when I was working with Steve, or now that I am working with Steve, is it's that I have this attachment that I need to be using a certain weight. But as far as an attachment personally to like feeling like this exercise is going to inherently be necessary, I don't think so as much. Maybe like when I was younger, you talk about like the, standard big lifts, but at this point, I think it's fairly well accepted that a wide variety of lifts can lead to pretty ideal hypertrophy. That it's not the most important thing. So,
Yeah, I think it's easy to be neurotic with like dumbbells and barbell movements that you know what you're supposed to use on. So, and maybe we'll just use like a lateral raise as an example. I mean, at points in my life, I've been able to do 35, 40 pound lateral raises with decent form. I don't know if it's like perfect form, like there might have been like a little body English in there. And
right.
so then when I incorporate a dumbbell lateral raise now, and I have this new kind of focus on movement quality, et cetera, 35 or 40 pounds is way too heavy for me. And
Mhm.
so, I'll go be like, okay, I'll use 25 pounds. It's all good. And then the reps will be perfect. And the next week I'll be like, okay, cool. Now I'll try 30 pounds. I want to work my way back up to like 35 to 40 for some reason, as if like that matters. Like if I don't do 35 or 40 pounds, I'm going to lose muscle or not have as much muscle as I did previously. Right.
Mhm.
Same thing with like an overhead press, or any other movement. If you have an association with a number, then it's really easy to think that you need to hit those numbers, or that means you lost muscle. At least that's the way
Yeah.
I would think about it. So since I got my functional trainer like 2 weeks ago, I've exchanged out like 70% of my free weight movements that I was doing bilaterally, because I didn't have a dual cable stack before. And I've just changed them all out for cables. And now I have no idea what the correlation is. Like I'm just doing like cable lateral raises and,
Instead of
pull
functional
downs and
trainer, this is like a piece of equipment.
yeah. So it's just basically it has a cable on either side with an arm that runs up and down, so you can change
Mhm.
the height of it. And then mine happens to also have like a high pulley and a low pulley, so I can do like pull downs and
Cool.
rows and stuff like that. But I just got that and changed out a lot of my movements, and now I have no association with a number. So like I'm doing lateral raises and it says there's 80 pounds on there, but it's a 4-to-1
Right.
calibration. So it's really 20 pounds. But like to me, that's nothing. It just, I know that I'm feeling tension on my lateral delts as I do the
Yeah.
movement. So I think things like that can be helpful. But like to your point, man, I just went through a 7-week strength phase where I was back squatting and deadlifting and stuff like this. And I haven't done those movements since 2016.
Mm.
And it was really hard for me. I got myself into a fatigue hole really quickly, and
Mm.
I wish I could do it over and be have a little bit more trepidation as I'm kind of working my way through, because I reached a fatigue point at like week 4, and then the last 3 weeks I've just been treading water. So, and that's all because of that association that I had to those lifts and those numbers.
How did your lifts compare at the end of that block compared to 2016?
At the 4 week point, where before the fatigue caught up with me really bad, I back squatted a 395 single at like an RPE 6. And back in 2016, I did 405 for 3, but it was like an RPE 12. Like
Right.
literally, I got stuck in the middle of the rep on the final rep. So I think like a 395 at RPE 6, they're pretty close. And then the deadlift, the fatigue from the deadlift was massive, but I pulled a 460 single at probably an RPE 6. It was the fastest that 460 ever moved for me. And then the fatigue hit me and I never got to try to match what would have been my old PR of 519.
Okay.
Nice.
I feel like it's interesting to me when people talk about their strength, like you were saying, I think, Bryan, about how, like, you were gone from those movements for so long, or you're doing other things. And for me, I feel like when it comes to like the big lifts, I guess it's a little hard to tell because I never stopped doing them. So it's a little bit hard to make the comparison. But now that I have, like, for instance, if I were to go like pull a deadlift right now, I feel like I would be nowhere near, like, even with a couple of weeks, I just feel like it would take me so long. Kind of like with Brad Loomis talking about how like he's not that strong. He's just really good at these exercises. I think for me, like I had a decent strength, especially for my weight. For deadlift, squat was like meh. Bench was pretty good, but I do feel like a lot of that was me just like getting used to it. And I think that's a lot of it because like you clearly have more muscle mass than me, Bryan. But we'll talk about how our peak strengths are so similar. And if I were to guess, I would think yours is more like a higher percentage of that strength in your case is from the actual, production of muscle force. And mine would maybe be a little bit more neurological if I had to guess.
I would agree with that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, did you guys find that these, I mean, I know you've adapted some of what Kasim has said, Bryan, but do you guys find that these recent discussions have actually changed how you're implementing anything? I mean, Abel, you're going to have a consult with them, so that almost likely will. I'd say for me, I've certainly changed exercises recently, but that's more because of working with Steve than it is any of the biomechanic discussions.
Yeah, I definitely have changed the way I've trained, like gradually over the last year and change. I've had like some side discussions with Kasim on DM about, movements that I'm doing and things like that too. So an example would be like, Kasim is super against trapping the scapula and lying down during any movements, whether that be like, lying upright rows or lying lateral raises or any of those things where you're prone, laying on your back. So supine. He prefers to let the scapula kind of move freely in those movements.
Lying upright rows, that you mean like with a cable?
Yeah. So you're lying on your back in a supine position, but you're pulling from a low cable like this.
Okay.
That used to be one of my favorite movements, a year ago. And then throughout a series of conversations with Kasim about that, I've kind of moved away from it. I also would say that just in the last 2 weeks, as I'm preparing to go to the N1 practical next week, you have to do 2 modules from the Biomechanics certification, I guess it is, on their site or whatever. I don't know if it's a certification is the right word, but basically it's like 114 modules and you have to do the first like 19 of the 114. So it talks a lot about like functional anatomy and some of the basic biomechanic stuff. And he has this little skeleton structure, as you guys have seen on your podcast and stuff, where he's specifically talking about the shoulder joint and he shows the little ball piece inside of the shoulder joint and how, when your elbows are out like this, whether you're pressing or pulling, like you get to a point where you just can't do anymore because that ball is pushing up against the top of the scapula. And then as the arm kind of tucks down, like in those presses, it moves freely. And then similarly, he was talking about like lateral raises and how, when you guys have heard him talk about how you lateral raise in the scapular plane, which would be like, in half in front, half to the side. And he shows on the skeleton how, if you go straight out to the side, you get about right here, just below parallel. And then any additional elevation is the trap elevating because that ball pushes up against the scapula and you can't actually get higher with just the lateral delt. But then it shows how, like, if you move into that scapular plane and the ball can actually move freely, and now you can get all the way up to here without the jamming into the scapula piece. And like, you can actually do those movements. And when you think about it that way, after you see him explain it and you're doing your lateral raises and you get to here, and then you're like, oh yeah, and then this comes up like that, you can kind of feel that the trap engages. Not that the trap engaging is wrong, because that does help with lateral raise abduction, shoulder abduction. But either way, a lot of those things I've implemented and feel that they are helping. So that would be my initial statement on that. And then I have, I'll let you guys talk, and then I have something else as well.
Okay. Do you want to say something, Abel?
Yeah. So I was thinking while Bryan was speaking, and honestly, not so much yet. Usually I'm looking to improve more so on the programming side, like more effective ways of breaking through strength plateaus and keeping progression more linear and playing around with volume and things like that. But as you said, I'm gonna have that consultation with him, and hopefully I will come across or go away with something new that I can implement, and I would be more than happy to. And I'm even prepared to, like, if certain things that Kasim was saying on my podcast are correct, then man, I will have to write a couple of emails to past clients and apologize to them, like, I was wrong here. All this thing that I rented you, or not I rented you, but, you know, like, I told you that it's this way. I'm wrong. So, hey, from now on, I advise that you do things this other way. So we will see.
Yeah, I mean,